Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Access Granted, where we bring lessons learned and case studies in the world of cybersecurity and specifically identity and privileged access space. Uh, Cloud is becoming the foundational pillar for many enterprises for agility and innovation perspective, but at the same time, it's also a key target for threat actors to compromise and steal data and intellectual property. So, in this episode or in this specific version of this Access Granted, we have a very special guest coming from a real world practitioner's point of view, a person with a deep experience and expertise in identity and access management, but at the same time, working with several enterprises in almost all the verticals around the world in helping them modernize their identity and access framework. Uh, Directly tying it to the problems and the opportunities that we have in securing access to data in the cloud world, and specifically focusing on AWS, Azure, GCP, at the same time SaaS and databases. Uh, so I would like to introduce Palak Chheda, who is a very experienced architect focusing on identity and access architectures for large enterprises as well as SaaS specific companies. Palak, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Nauman. Happy to be speaking with you. Identity and access management is near and dear to my heart. So, yeah, let's see what we come up with today.
Yeah, and I'm very excited because you are that unique architect who understands the business sensitivity around security and identity, but at the same time, very real world perspective of how things can be modernized in a enterprise who are focusing on moving the workloads in the cloud world. And maybe Palak, before we start jump dive in, maybe you can share with the audience in terms of your background. Where have you spent the most time, and what companies have you worked before joining this Bridev?
Yeah, thanks, Nauman, for that intro. I don't consider myself as an architect as such, but yeah, I've definitely seen, very weird use cases and weird implementations of identity, let's just say, that needed a lot of restructuring and redefining, right? So as a life of a consultant, I started in consulting right after my grad school. So, have seen environments with 100,000 identities to, smaller environments with 50 users, right? And each of them kind of have unique set of challenges and problems. But in a lot of ways, I think identity industry as a whole has given same problems to everybody, right? So there are very common set of challenges and problems, whether it is with IGA or whether more recently with cloud access and permissions, right? That has remained a constant. I'm glad to see like our industry is evolving and evolving for better, kind of to help customers of all sizes or organizations of all sizes to help improve and shore up their identity programs, right? So yeah, I've been like I said, it's been an exciting journey for me in this space, and last 12 years I've kind of had to kind of learn a lot of things on the job, but also keep evolving, right? The cloud and the tech world or the software industry is evolving a lot faster, and I'm happy to kind of see identity and access management area kind of evolve with it, right? And thanks to obviously organizations like Brighter and some others that are bringing identity to the future.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Palak, for this intro. Um, the first question that I want to pick your brain on is, identity is was not traditionally part of cybersecurity, right? In general, it was considered an infrastructure, user administration type of area, but recently it's becoming a foundational pillar of cybersecurity. And we are lucky, in a way, we are lucky to have you because you work with different verticals, customers of all sizes in health sciences, pharma, retail, automotive. What is that one thing? What has changed in terms of the focus? Why are customers so focused on securing access and focusing on securing identities? Maybe give some share some perspective from your side.
Yeah, I think it might be hard to kind of just hone in on just one reason or like one way or that is kind of forcing a lot of organization in this direction, right? Obviously, cloud adoption and your network not being your parameter anymore, right? We keep hearing this in the identity industry a whole lot, that identity is the new parameter, right? Or identity is the one where the security starts, and which is becoming more and more true in the cloud environment as well, right? So as kind of organizations adopt this multi-cloud environments, or even kind of people moving away from being in an office environment, being on VPN or like local network 100% of the time, and now moving to cafes and even their homes to work, right? So your network can't go as far as to protect all your elements of your infrastructure, right? So identity is kind of that one key place where you can start from and achieve a lot of good things as far as security and audit controls are concerned. And regardless of kind of the size of the organization, one thing I think I'll kind of reiterate, like you said, right? Like identity either starts as an operational activity for an organization, right? Or something that IT kind of implements and manages, right? To begin with, maybe because the organization is small or the security program is not very mature. But I think soon most of our customers do recognize that, it is a joint effort between both identity and security per se, and also like IT and operational aspects, right? Because identity does kind of play a very critical role in kind of both operationalizing your infrastructure and environment, but also securing it.
I agree, Palak. I think well said. And so, if I look at the overall identity landscape, or maybe I would say a modern cloud stack, right? I think a lot of customers they understand IDP, which is basically your single
Yeah.
sign-on and MFA type of user authentication, and then they also, I think, have a need driven from more compliance and audit perspective in the IGA space, which is a identity governance and administration space. They're looking for attestations
Yeah.
and proof to our auditors that they have security in place. Right, those two things are, I would say, pretty well understood. Now, the third key pillar, which is becoming more prominent now, is that privileged authorization space, which is normally many times tied to just-in-time JIT access. Now, in modern world, the CISOs and the different cloud security team and IAM are looking at privilege access management or JIT in a very different way, or in a slightly different way. So, tell us something about in your discussions with CISOs and cloud security teams or infrastructure team, DevOps teams, when they talk about JIT, especially
Yeah.
from the perspective of a modern cloud privilege access management. What are they saying? What is the requirement that they're looking for?
Yeah, I think again, this is also very multifaceted, right? There is one side of the house where it's people always see IAM as a blocker, right? Especially in the cloud infrastructure and environment. IAM is typically kind of the part of the program that is considered a burden or something that slows them down, right? So whether we talk to, say, platform engineering teams or engineering teams that are kind of moving at cloud speed to kind of enable the business, identity, security, audit controls are kind of considered something that would slow them down, right? So that is one aspect of kind of quote unquote a wish or an almost like a requirement, a hard set requirement is to kind of appease their platform engineering group, right? Appease the developers. And there are security reasons for those too, because these users or your developers are smart, right? So if your security is the most painful way of getting things done, they are going to find shortcuts and make it less painful for themselves, right? So that is one avenue of like, okay, how can a modern IAM program or a modern PAM solution can not only help me keep my environment secure, but kind of enable my developers to do their job and do that more efficiently, right? So that's one aspect of things. The other one is the security programs, though might be expanding from budget standpoint, people are not finding the right talent to kind of keep up with larger environments and larger infrastructure projects, right? So how they can kind of decouple or loosen the burden of like managing infrastructure of the platform itself, right? And maybe have a SaaS solution or like a lightweight solution that can help kind of meet the security and audit requirements, but doesn't require three or four, FTEs to build and manage those environments, right? So just even from operational standpoint, how can they, get the most value without, spending so much on the infrastructure or, human capital managing that infrastructure, right? Um, so yeah, I think those are, I think, key things that are changing and changing over time. More and more, I think I'm also hearing CISOs and IAM program managers talk about ephemerality of access, how can I manage my access in a more ephemeral way? IGA solutions or solutions that provision access for a long amount of time, right? Statically assigned permissions. But I think, yeah, a lot of folks that we are talking to more recently are coming around to a fact where a lot of the access that they grant doesn't have to be persistent, doesn't have to be static, right? And more so important in the cloud, where your account takeover is just bound to happen in most cases, right? So
That's great. And I think a lot of it is driven through recent security breaches, whether it's Capital One or Experian or MGM. A lot of it, the reason was static accounts or over provisioned permissions that are not ephemeral in nature, and cyber attackers, they were able to steal some of those accounts which has over provisioned privileges, and they're able to laterally move or was able to steal the data, including the ransomware attacks, right? So it is driving a lot of that urgency. Now for people who are listening and they are in the process of evaluating a more modern just-in-time solution for privileged access management, specifically in the cloud, what would be your, let's say, two or three pointers or tips that look for these three things if you want to really differentiate a legacy player who may just be doing cloud washing, saying we are a cloud solution as well, versus a true cloud privileged access management solution? What would be the two or three? Well, humans can remember two or three things, not more than that. So what would be those two or three things?
yeah, I would say one, I think I alluded to this earlier. Don't leave your customers behind. By me being as a product manager at Twitter, one thing I realized quickly, unless the developers are happy, none of your security programs are going to succeed internally, right? So that I would say, keep your developers, keep your end users in mind, make things easy, simplified for them, make security the easy way, right? That's one. The other one I would say is how quickly can you operationalize your environment, right? Meaning you're building up containerized environments at cloud speed. Can your IAM platform and system keep up with it, right? Are you able to put in the right automations in place, the right controls in place as soon as the infrastructure is built, right? And maybe decouple your access as soon as the infrastructure is destroyed, right? So how can you like have right automated plans as part of your CI/CD programs, right? And then the third piece, which is related to that, is don't leave your non-human accounts and access behind as well, right? Look for solutions that can do maybe both, right? Maybe ephemeral access or list privilege access even for your CI/CD pipelines, even for your machine identities, your non-human identities and consoles, right? Don't leave them behind because, as you mentioned, some of the hacks, little bit earlier, a lot of the hacks also stem from long-standing static keys, keys that are used in your CI/CD pipeline, keys that a developer forgot and pushed to a GitHub repository maybe, right? And those keys, not only those authentications or those credentials are long term, the permissions attached to those credentials are also long term, right? I think today the technology and the control in our industry has come to a place where that is not necessary in most use cases, right? And more often than not, people have not kind of still come to the place where they can kind of either mitigate that problem or implement the right controls for those two. So I think that would be, I think, the third thing that I would say, in addition to again the developer experience, the speed and the agility of your IAM program and your IAM toolset, and don't leave non-human identities behind.
That's great. I think it's very crisp in terms of things that we should look for in a modern identity and privilege access management solution. Now, let's say if you are an architect or IAM architect, security architect, you're moving your workloads to either AWS or Azure or GCP, Oracle, does not matter. And I think in a way, cloud did a fantastic job in providing a more granular permissions through their IAM constructs. And every cloud provider may have a very different way of doing things, right? So AWS has the identity center that does things differently than Azure PIM solutions or Entra ID doing it very differently. GCP has a different way. So when architects are looking to evaluate, how can they solve these new challenges, which maybe with SaaS solutions, Kubernetes clusters, access to GitHub, access to Snowflake, and not just necessarily the old way of just securing access to Windows or Linux or some on-prem database. Why are customers leaning towards a solution like a Brightif, right? When you have solutions available from within the platform, and the cloud native is the way to go for many enterprises. What are some of the key, I would say, aspirations for people to look at solutions like Brightif?
Yeah, I think one thing that kind of comes to mind right away, and even a lot of our customers and prospects who look at kind of Brightwave as a technology and what it can do, is support for multi-cloud, right? None of these CSP specific capabilities carry over to your different cloud and SaaS environments, right? So I think that value proposition is very, very strong. I think there was a recent survey done by Oracle where 98% of their survey respondents said that they are in a multi-cloud environment and they will continue to be, right? So that's something that you cannot expect one CSP to solve for, right? Two, even if they do decide to solve, the capability that they will be able to provide across your multi-cloud environment is going to be different, right? So they might have better capabilities or more tight-grained integrations with their own cloud platform, but maybe not so much into others, right? So, for example, I think Azure recently launched like their AWS Access program or something like that, which all they are essentially doing is group synchronizations, right? So you're still again having to fall back to skim and skim related use cases of managing users and groups and just synchronizing group memberships for access, which I think doesn't go as far as to having fine-grained control in the cloud environment, right? I think that's one of the key value prop, right, for having something like Brighter in your environment that can one have very succinct capabilities for fine-grained authorizations across your cloud and SaaS environment, right? And also bring that same controls and experiences for your end user to on-premise. Um, Speaking of experience, I think that's the other one is like how well a solution would fit in your environment without requiring, again, a lot of development, right? Yes, a lot of the modern cloud platform CSPs have a lot of APIs that you can build upon. You can kind of build a solution for it, right? We've had customers who started along those lines where they had to build something of their own, right? They started with AWS. They went down the path of either role assumptions on AWS or identity center integrations. But then they quickly realize now, okay, how do we expand this into more clouds and more SaaS environments, right? And not only the administration or the development aspect, but like your users, your developers are going to have a fractured experience, right? Yes, you manage to kind of pull something together on your own for one cloud or for one use case, right? But how are you going to expand that further into multiple use cases, right? For example, console access versus CLI access, right? Maybe CLI access with integration to your ITSM solution, right? So, bringing a lot of those components together that sit in your environment today. I think a lot of the cloud providers kind of fall short there, right? And again, their identity is not their primary business, right? I think that's what I always kind of think about, right, when I'm talking about Brighter or what we do, right? We come from IAM background and we are built for, your identity problems. So why don't you help us solve those problems, right? And let your CSPs kind of work at giving you the right infrastructure to manage your cloud infrastructure, right? So I think it's a no-brainer when kind of one, either some of our prospects see that, or two, some of our customers who already had gone down the path of building their own platforms and systems, but then quickly realized this is not something that can sustain long term, and they need to look for a solution like Brighter.
That's great, Palak. I like the way you framed it that you have an identity problem and we are the experts in solving that identity
Yeah,
problem. And I think this is really good. I think it's having people who come from this space, right, who knows the traditional world really well, right, the world of CyberArks and the world of other providers who are in this space. They have done a fantastic job in the on-prem world, but now with cloud coming in, they're bringing new services, new use cases that are being developed. AI is coming in into play, and I'm sure that there is a more better way, more operationally simpler way of doing things. That again goes back to your point of developer efficiency, right? How can you make it friendly for users? How can you make it easier for operations team? Now, from the perspective of overall um, the teams that you work with, right? So, you know, the fact that IAM team was never considered part of cybersecurity, right? And most of the times a lot of teams are not even matured in the cloud space, right? The use cases around serverless and Lambda and non-machine users or machine users, they may not be fully matured or aware of it. When you work with different customers, do you interface with the IAM team, security team, DevOps or infrastructure teams? And how do you see this transformation happening in terms of teams either merging together or teams working in more in a partnership fashion to figure out what the modern problems are and how can we solve this through better way of better solutioning? What do you see?
Yeah, good question, Noman. I think more recently, I'm seeing a lot of these teams coming together to us, right? And that has been pretty rewarding for somebody like me who's kind of been a very IAM person focused only in IAM team, right? Being a consultant early on, you're only talking to an IAM team or a group of engineers that very much focused in implementing an IGA solution or an access management solution, right? To now even my scope of work has expanded into cloud ops, DevOps, how some of these workflows work today versus what an IAM person had to do in the past, right? So there is a lot of evolution, I would say, of how these programs kind of work well together. And even IAM practitioner have to, I think, come a long way, right, including myself, to kind of not only understand the basics of identity and access and how it is done in a corporate environment, but also understand these modern use cases and modern workflows, right? So obviously there is a partnership involved, but there is also um, an IAM person has to sympathize with the cloud implementers or the developers, right, and the problems that exist in their world, right? So I would say about 3 or 5 years ago, our DevOps team will come to us with a problem and a challenge statement, right? And it will take us some time to even understand how do we map it back to basic IAM requirements, right, or basic IAM use cases. Whereas today, those things have come a long way, right? And there are solutions like Brightive that can help you enable, a lot of those use cases and workflows. So it has been kind of one rewarding as an IAM practitioner that these two worlds are kind of merging together so that they work better for an organization regardless of the size and their infrastructure. But also, it's been kind of eye-opening how what an impact an IAM program, a good IAM program, can make on some of these elements of your organization. So yeah, I think it's been a learning process for me personally, but also I think for the industry in terms of like, how can we kind of bridge the gap between IAM program that is often considered, a burden or a silo, and bridging that to, your cloud infrastructure and SaaS teams.
That's great, Palak. I also see the same trend. So generally, right, for businesses, right, who are trying to build this identity and access management modern cloud stack, right? And I just came from a customer who is looking to do this, like doing the right things the right way, instead of just being reactive and focusing just on the symptoms and not the root cause. What do you think would be the mandatory component of this identity, modern identity cloud stack, right? What products you would initially start to focus on? I'm sure that everybody has an IDP, but in addition to that, what could be a minimal viable modern cloud stack that you would recommend?
Interesting. Um, yeah, I think it's obviously hard to say and pinpoint to just one solution, right? Uh, and and for every environment, things might be different. Um, I think I always go back to like the need of the business, right? Why are we even implementing a certain piece of technology, right? And why do we need that in our environment, right? Can we say that, okay, this is going to facilitate our business. This is going to enable our developers to do more, right? So a solution like Brightive that can kind of not only integrate with your current IDP or an SSO provider, right, or an access management solution, but also give you access request capabilities, right? Not every access is going to be, part of your corporate RBAC program or centralized enterprise RBAC program, right? There is always going to be out of band access that is going to be needed, right? So how are you going to enable those use cases? All right, how can maybe developer build their own access, right, and define like here are the permissions I need, Here are the things that my users are going to need on my application that I'm going to deploy in our cloud environment, right? Can the developer come and kind of facilitate that for themselves, right? Rather than going through a very cumbersome ITSM ticketing process, right? Or a game of Chinese whisper to kind of get to the access that they need, right? Can you enable those kind of use cases? Can you bring more context to how users are accessing the systems, right? For example, back in the day when an IGA solution gets an approval from your manager or the infrastructure owner, you get that access permanently, right? Regardless of how long you need it, regardless of how much you even use it, right? Whereas a solution like Brightive that is brokering your access day in and day out, it has information about how often a user is even accessing certain permissions, right? How long are they using certain permissions? Or maybe over time they've stopped using it because they moved to a different team or they got promoted or what have you. So can you bring those data points in, right? And pare down the access, right? Bring users to more least privilege than you could have been thus far, right? So those are kind of the things that I think a lot of organizations are thinking about and will continue to evolve more as we kind of move towards this, very AI-driven, ML-driven use cases and workflows, even for, access management, right-sizing access, and fine-grained access control.
That's great. That's great, Palak. So you, I think, alluded to a IDP layer and then a CPAM layer, which is like a right
Absolutely.
here, for example, and
Yeah.
IGA type of a solution. That makes up the minimal stack that probably a modern enterprise would look for. I mean, obviously there could be parallel obvious solutions like a Wiz or Orca from a CNAP perspective, right? But in general, I think from identity space, these three layers are important one. Obviously, in addition to AD or user directory that you might be using to create the users in the first place. Um, One important question, right? So for people or young professionals or people who are looking to make identity and access, especially because it's now becoming a part of cybersecurity, and there's also a lot of AI, Gen AI use cases that are needs to get secured through identity and access perspective. What would be your advice for some of those professionals on what type of training they can take, what skills they can learn to become very effective in this important aspect of cybersecurity?
Good question. I think it has been for me personally, it has been a culmination of a lot of different experiences, playing a lot of different roles in various organizations, right? I think there are a few key things that I always fall back on is kind of the basics, right? Always get your basics right in terms of what an IAM program is and should be for an organization, right? A good example of it is just there are a very good basic constructs that you can kind of come across in various blogs or even places like Gartner that will help you understand, the quick do's and don'ts of a good IAM program, right? Why multiple accounts to a same identity could be painful, right? Why shouldn't you have shadow accounts? Those kind of things are something that you can always fall back to, right? Regardless of how your infrastructure is grown, right? So even starting early from, Active Directory and Open LDAP days to kind of now in the cloud, right? Those things kind of still stand true, right? So understanding the basic principles of a good IAM program and good IAM controls that kind of apply. The next I would say is, I always try to go back to three whys, right? Ask yourself, why are we doing this? If so, why again, right? And go down at least three levels of why. And that's when you can kind of start to discover the right fit for your use case or your problem statement, right? Um, if your purpose is to do X, understanding why you need to do that kind of helps guide a lot of the solutioning and a lot of the aspects of what you're trying to do, right? So I think that from just fundamental standpoint kind of has helped me in the past, and then what I try to apply even today, right? And lastly, I would say like cloud is, I think, not going anywhere. The use cases are kind of, different from where they used to be. So always keeping a keen eye on how your infrastructure or your enterprise is evolving in that regard, right? And how your user needs are changing, kind of helps you shape, a lot of the things that you can kind of make an impact on within your environment or within your organization, right? So adopting to kind of modern use cases, modern needs of your customers, quote unquote, your internal customers can kind of go a long way.
That's great advice, Palak. Great advice. Um, One additional question is that now with this whole cloud privilege access management and the transformative nature of this identity and access management space, right, where the challenges in the cloud world are very different. So you need to look for a new and different way of doing things as opposed to a improved version of the old, or I call it
Yeah.
cloud washing. There is a need for technology champions, right, who have the courage to challenge the status quo and understand the problems and look to solve these problems for the business with a very open mind. So, what is your definition of a technology champion, and how would you encourage or welcome team to collaborate with people like you, right, to define something for the industry and then blaze the trail with that knowledge and awareness to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think you had a lot of good tidbits in the question itself, right? Like, be open to change, right? Embrace the change. Like, there's nothing that um, will stop you, right? Or shouldn't stop you to embrace a change. Um, and also keep a keen eye on like how the use cases and problem statements are changing, right? One good example that always comes to my mind is like session recording was such a big thing of a privileged access solution, right? And when you are within an environment, when you're using maybe shared accounts or shared root admins and administrative accounts, right? Maybe it makes sense, but in the modern cloud world, what are you going to record? People clicking buttons in an AWS console or like on the GCP console, right? Or how are you going to record, a screen recording of an RPA process or a CI/CD pipeline running somewhere, right? So challenging some of those kind of archaic way of looking at privilege access management, I think should be challenged more and more, right? Not only for your own good, but also in case of like, when you're trying to sit and define what an ideal privilege access management solution is for you, right? Yeah, so challenging the status quo obviously goes a long way. If, not even in IAM program, right? In general, in any kind of work you're doing, right? Or in your life as well, right? There is always multiple ways to do something. And, as the use cases and the environments evolve, there are things that are going to change. There are new ways that are going to be made possible, right? And with AI and ML coming our way, I think there is more and more of these use cases that are going to open up, and more ways of kind of achieving the goal, right? At the end of the day, so yeah, I think challenge the status quo, bring new ideas to the table, help us also evolve our offering, right? So if you have new ideas and things that you would like to see in a platform like Brighter, bring that to us, right? A lot of the things that we do within Brighter is kind of listen to our customers, whom we treat as partners, and listen to what they have to say, right? So a lot of the capabilities, even recently, we have built within the platform has been thanks to kind of our customers and their needs to do better than what they have in the past, right? And we've kind of been able to cater to those needs.
That's great, Palak. I think yeah, we have always done it this way is the most dangerous phrase in English language, right? So this is not the world where we embrace status quo. Instead, we need to embrace change and be flexible with our thought process. Now, coming to what you mentioned about your approach or Brandon approach to platform development is the customers pain customer use cases. And I think you mentioned about generative AI. So, is there any, are you seeing any trends in terms of customers worried about generative AI use cases and the privacy and data sensitivity? And can identity solutions like Bradiff can help in that area? Have you seen any upcoming trends in that space?
I think, yeah, I think there are definitely conversations happening in that realm, right? But I don't think, at least in my mind, there isn't a clear value prop of what this could be in the very near future, right? In the long term, yes, maybe there are, avenues where you want to keep your LLMs in check, right? That's obviously one thing that is always spoken about when it comes to LLMs and your AI models kind of going rogue on your data, right? And making maybe that data accessible outside of your organization. So from data privacy and protection standpoint, that is something that is kind of running in everybody's um, mind right now. One thing that I am kind of in near term excited about is like the whole problem of right sizing access, right? Right sizing was access to what and when, right? And are they even using that access? So I think signals that an access broker like Brightwave can provide, your same solution can provide, can all be culminated into one kind of key area, or like multiple key areas, but one among them is kind of right sizing of access, right? I think IAM practitioners like myself has always kind of thought of wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to kind of go through this exercise of right sizing my roles every so often, right? So your RBAC programs are never complete because you never get a clear picture of how access is being used or how access is being granted today, right? So there are a lot of signals, a lot of data that is probably generated within your environment that can kind of inform those decisions. But I don't think we have a good handle on those today. But I think in near term, maybe AI use cases will help us to get there because they will be able to kind of process a lot of these information in a short amount of time, but also give us some valuable insight of our environment and of our access and how our users are kind of navigating within our environment.
Makes sense, Palak. I think you mentioned, Palak, access broker, right? And a lot of people who are not in the traditional IAM world, right? They always get confused about this whole broker concept versus a proxy concept. So maybe there's a quick differentiation for our listeners here, right? What do you mean by the broker way of doing things versus a proxy way of doing things, and how one is more operationally simpler than the other?
Yeah, I think there's one parallel I always like to draw, and I speak to this about Brightwave to our customers as well, is like, consider Brightwave as your vending machine for permissions, right? Your Brightwave is going to give you the authorizations you need if you come to the vending machine, right? So Brightwave is basically brokering your access, not necessarily um, keeping the keys and then walking you through every environment, right? So the example I always like to give in terms of proxying solutions or proxying access is you kind of check in at the front desk and then there is a security guard with bunch of keys with him, right? That is walking you from room A to room B, or one data center to another, right? But that security person is always walking with you. There are a lot of problems with that. One, you can only have that many security people, maybe, right? Or, the proxy becomes kind of one point of failure, a bottleneck. Or two, those keys are static. Those keys that the security guard has been carrying on their waist, they are static keys that are long term with access granted to them to various rooms and various, data centers and server rooms and whatnot, right? So is that really what we need in their environment today, right? Is maybe the question to be asked, right? Is that what satisfies um, your privilege access requirements? Whereas Brighter, the way we approach things, like I said, is, we are going to broker the permissions for you, right? We are going to give you for a short amount of time, and we are going to take that away, right? We are going to take those permissions away. We are maybe going to even destroy your accounts, right? Everything is ephemeral in nature. Not that it is not audited, not that you are going to lose the audit trail, because the audit trail is always going to stay, but at least the attack surface is going to go down, right? But there are not going to be, vast swoops of persistently assigned access accounts that can be taken over by bad actors.
Got it. Got it. So coming back to your analogy of that security person at the hotel, if I am in the broker mode, then I don't need that security guard to escort me to the room. All you can do is just program my key card, and I can just go and walk to the room and access the room directly, right? So there is no, I would say, extra burden from an operational perspective required that maybe
Yeah,
with the proxy mode, like installing agents and opening ports and protocol for that security person to actually even go and access different
right.
rooms and
Absolutely.
gym,
Yeah.
for example, right? So that's great. I think it's definitely operationally efficient, more modern way of doing things. We are coming close to our time, and before we leave, I want my guests to leave two key takeaways or two tips or two learnings for them to take away for this podcast. What would that be for your listeners?
Yeah, one, I think listen to your customers. I think I learned that a hard way being a product manager, myself in the past. Your your tool set, your implementation can only be as successful as much use it gets, right? So make your, IAM program the easy way out for everybody, right? So that people are not poking holes or figuring out other ways to doing things, right? That's one. And two, I think we touched on very recently, or like just a few minutes ago, is be open to kind of new use cases, right? the world is changing around you. Challenge the status quo, and maybe try to evaluate why you are doing a certain things a certain way. Ask yourself why, maybe at three levels. I think those are, I think, two key takeaways, I would say. Always cater to your end user, cater to your customers, and so be it internal customers, and to challenge the status quo and keep an eye open for the changing world and the changing use cases around you.
That's fantastic, Palak. Customer obsession and be flexible to innovate, right? So that's great advice for everybody listening in. Thanks, Palak, for joining this episode, and I'm sure we will do more of these on some specific topics. But it's great insight, and thank you so much for joining today's podcast.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Would love to chat with you more on all things identity and access.
Awesome, fantastic, Palak. Thank you.
Thank you.